Good afternoon, friends, and warm welcome to Focus on Africa. Focus on Africa was started 4 years ago. The program was a partnership between the Division of Applied Social Sciences in KAFNR and the Bonn Life Science Center's Life Science Society program. We would like to thank today's sponsors, the MU Office of Research and KAFNR International Programs, directed by Dr. Carrie Clark. CIP provides capacity building and development assistance to global partners and facilitates global engagement for MU students and faculty. When you came in, you saw a survey on your chair. If you have time before you leave, please fill that out for us and give us your feedback and sit it here on the table as you leave. Next, I'd like to introduce Barry Tuka BK. He is a third-year doctoral student in the Environmental and Development Economics in the Division of Applied Social Sciences in KAFNR. He's also pursuing a minor in International Development. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Jacob. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. We have two presenters today, and our first presenter is Dr. Sean Prowl. He's an assistant professor in anthropology, completed his PhD from Indiana University in 2014, followed by a postdoctoral position at UCLA. His work is at the interaction between health, hormones, and reproductive decisions. Since 2016, he has been working with the Himba pastoralists. Semi-nomadic pastoralists in northern Namibia on a longitudinal project focused on health and reproduction. His presentation is titled Expectations and Obligations, Paternal Care and Social Fatherhood in Himba Pastoralists. Today he will present research on paternity uncertainty and patterns of paternal care in Himba pastoralists of northern Namibia, a population with high levels of paternity uncertainty, but also strong expectations of equal paternal investment. When paternity uncertainty is high, men may benefit from biased investment in children. Little work has been done in populations with high paternity uncertainty, and much of the research focuses exclusively on the biological returns to biased investment patterns. Okay, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Pratt.
Hi everybody, I'm Sean Prowl. I'm a new assistant professor in anthropology, and I'm going to be talking today about my work the last couple of years with the Himba of Namibia. Just let me know if you can't hear me if I talk too fast. So I want to start off by noting some of the sort of general principles surrounding evolutionary understandings between mating and parenting. So evolutionary studies of fatherhood have typically focused on a couple of facets here, things like marriage and monogamy, paternity uncertainty, and paternal care. And the links here suggest that monogamous marriage increases paternity certainty via presumed exclusivity of a relationship. Marriage and monogamy also increase the opportunity and likelihood of paternal care, and the paternity certainty provides important fitness incentives for paternal care. And so a lot of this research is backed up by animal studies, particularly in birds. Little work has actually been done with humans in this regard. It tends to be relatively indirect work. So, of course, in humans, the links between things like paternal care, paternity uncertainty, and monogamy are much more complicated. Widespread ethnographic literature suggests a distinction between social fatherhood and biological fatherhood. We all know what biological fatherhood is. But social fatherhood is children born into or belonging to the relationship or belonging to an individual man. That's independent of the paternity aspect of that relationship. So I want to show you two different examples that sort of highlight the variation in humans that we see. The first is from the Naimba of Nepal. So this is a population where they have fraternal polyandry, which means that one woman is married to a set of brothers. So they are shared fatherhood by the co-husbands. All the co-husbands are considered fathers of the child, but of course there's one biological child, and the woman decides to designate that individual man as the genitor. That's the biological father. And men report being concerned about biological fatherhood. Despite the fact that they're all considered the social fathers of the kid, they are concerned about their biological fatherhood. And the second example is the Kapele. They are in Liberia. And in this case, children are of really high economic importance. They're really useful for household tasks and that sort of thing. In this case, husbands or lovers may try to claim children when paternity is in doubt because they want to have that child for the labor. So fatherhood is a negotiated resource, which is dependent on sort of the socio-ecological conditions of the men involved. So despite these links between paternity and fatherhood, much of evolutionary perspectives on fatherhood have really been thinking about paternity uncertainty and paternity in general, less on the role of social fatherhood, despite the importance social fatherhood may have in decision-making processes. So when we think about reproductive decisions more broadly and in the context of social fatherhood, there's a number of costs and trade-offs involved. So I've listed a couple up here, things like the cost of investment in reproductive returns of care. So do you actually get a fitness benefit in caring for your offspring? The norms surrounding care and the visibility of those norms within the community. So if you know, there's a strong norm for being a father, and if you violate that norm, that may come at some cost. The economic value of children is really important. So it may benefit you to have children and to care for children, even if they're not biologically yours, because you gain some economic return from those kids. The social value of children, I'll talk about a little bit later, and sort of the costs and benefits of fatherhood on future reproductive opportunities. So you may be losing out on future reproductive opportunities if you are investing too much in the current offspring. And so, thinking about fatherhood, there's a suite of social and biological conditions that influence these decision-making processes regarding maternal investment and care. And I'm going to try in my talk today to explore a couple of these in the study community that I work with. So this work is done as part of the Community and Rural Health and Demography Project. This is a project I've been involved in the last couple of years in northwest Namibia, way up there in the mountainous corner. It's a community of around 2,000 people or so, about 40 compounds with 5 to 25 people per compound. It's a really dry, arid environment, as you can see here. The specific area we work in has got a dry river bed that allows for seasonal gardens. So it makes these semi-nomadic pastoralists a little more sedentary, and they're easier to follow and get information from nearby here. Wanted to highlight some of the work we're doing here as part of this project. A lot of the research surrounds the interactions between mating, health, and parenting. I've just highlighted a couple of those areas here that I've been working on. Things like sleep health, partner preferences, food insecurity, that sort of thing. And part of this work, we collect a lot of different types of data. So these trips to the field involve long, detailed demographic interviews. Aging, for example, is very difficult in this community. They don't use a calendar year age, so we have age names that we need to derive that, the biological age of the individual. We spend a lot of time doing interviews about maternity, about fatherhood. I also do a lot of more direct measurements of health, so things like anthropometrics of kids, for example, actigraphy, sleep, psychological questionnaires, all sorts of stuff. So the Himba, this is a really interesting population to work in. As I mentioned, they're semi-nomadic agro-pastoralists. They have polygynous marriage. What's really interesting about this group in terms of thinking about reproduction and parenting is that extramarital partners are normalized and very common. So what I mean by that is basically all married men and women have at least one boyfriend and girlfriend on the side. And this is actually allowed within this community, and actually there's norms that prop up and support this institution. So as you can imagine, if everybody's got a boyfriend and a girlfriend, extra parent paternity is very high. It's actually the highest we've ever recorded. We sent a paper out a couple weeks ago about this. And alongside, with many other pastoralists, Himba men generally have a low level of maternal care. And this is not particularly uncommon for pastoralists. So with this high frequency of extramarital partners, you get quotes like this. Even my wives here have boyfriends, and I have kids with them, and I care for those kids too. So this sort of is implying the role of social fatherhood already, right? And I'm really looking at how your understandings of fatherhood bias or change your care and investment patterns. And so here's an example of what might happen. This is from one Himba man. Sometimes when the child from the boyfriend comes home, you can say, "You're dirty now from playing, go to your mother." But when your own child comes home, you don't care, you take him up in your lap and you give him something. So this is just sort of an anecdote, an example of what we see as biased investment, right? So this example, this guy is relaying the fact that he believes that fathers may give more to their biological offspring than their social offspring. And so this sets up a really interesting conundrum when we look at this through the lens of these issues related to reproductive decisions I mentioned off the bat. So I'm going to explore a couple of these. The first one I want to talk about is paternal care as related to paternity confidence. So the literature is very specific on this prediction, right, as I mentioned at the beginning. High paternity confidence should equal high maternal care. And again, there's a cost benefit here. If you are investing too much in kids that are not your own, you're losing out to future reproductive opportunities and future opportunities for investment. So fathers really have to decide how much to invest and when to invest based on things like the local impacts of investment, so if investment actually has a return. The ability of substitute investors, if there's other investors around, if there's other family members that can invest in the offspring, they may be able to pull back a little bit. And then, of course, paternity confidence. And again, the main prediction here is that paternal investment should be moderated by paternity confidence. So there's not much research examining this in humans, but we do see a couple of papers out there looking at this. So there's some evidence that perceived mate fidelity is related to paternity confidence, is related to paternal investment. So if you believe your wife is more faithful, you're more likely to invest in your kids. Another one is perceived resemblance. So if you think you look like your kid, you're more likely to invest in that kid relative to kids you think you don't look like. And so we have to balance these expectations against a couple of things, right? So I mentioned these social expectations related to paternity and fatherhood, the benefits of social fatherhood, and things like child labor. And we might predict specific investments in specific domains of paternal care to minimize some of these costs. I'm going to talk about what this actually means here next. I do want to mention that social fatherhood is a very important thing in NAHIMBA. So they report that being a good father is of high value to them. They report that social norms dictate equal investment in kids, whether they're biological or non-biological kids. You are expected to invest in both children equally. I should mention that as results of our genetic study, men actually seem to know who is and is not their kid. It's about 75% accuracy rate, which is really, really high and really, really interesting, right? So they tend to know who their biological kids and their social kids are, but they are expected to invest in them equally. So as part of this project, I looked at a couple of different domains of investment, so I've highlighted those here. And I've highlighted them on an axis of public to private. So public domains are things that are more visible to the community. Private domains are things that are less visible. And you might expect that in private domains, it's easier to get away with biased investment, right? So you expect those to be the areas where biased investment might occur. So bride price, men pay the bride price for their sons. Livestock gifts, these are small gifts of sheep and cows to their offspring. This is not the main bulk of their inheritance, which is passed through matrolaterally, so you actually inherit your livestock through your maternal uncle, not from your father. Fosterage decisions, that's pretty obvious. In the food transfers, we are measuring through anthropometrics. And so these are 4 different areas where we're trying to see if we see biased investment in this community. And so we map paternity data, demographic data, and then a bunch of different records related to livestock transfers, fosterage records, and anthropometrics to see if we're seeing biased investments. And on top of that, we did a series of vignettes to measure social norms, the expectations of equal investment within these different domains. And I'm going to jump into some results here. So I'm showing you here livestock gifts and bride price, and I'm showing you the posterior distributions of some multi-level models here. These are the expectations that we see for boys, girls, and then I've got AMOCA and non-AMOCA categories here. AMOCA are the, it's the word that relates to the child from the boyfriend. It means like she went to the far place to get the water. So when you see AMOCA kids, think kids from the boyfriend. When you see non-AMOCA kids, you think kids from the husband. Does that make sense? So what we're seeing here in terms of livestock gifts to children, livestock gifts to adults, and bride price, we actually are seeing no difference between AMOCA and non-AMOCA kids. So we're seeing actually equal investment by those fathers relative to their paternity confidence. And I'm showing you here, these are the distributions of the difference. So if the distribution is off to one side, we're going to see there can be a difference between the two categories. So this is the result of the fosterage analysis, and what we're seeing here is that while there's no difference for girls in orange here, there's no difference between AMOCA and non-AMOCA girls in terms of whether they're fostered out or not, but for boys, we see that they're much more likely to be fostered if they're believed to be AMOCA. So if they're believed to be from the boyfriend, they're much more likely to be fostered to their household. I should mention that fosterage is really common in this community. It's like 20% of all kids are fostered. So it's something that might be easier to get away with in this community. And then these are the results of the anthropometric analysis. So here I'm showing you, we took longitudinal height, weight, and BMI values, and then I calculated standardized residuals for this population. So this is a population-specific comparison. And I'm plotting here the same comparison here between AMOCA and non-AMOCA boys and girls. What we see here is that for height, there's no difference for AMOCA and non-AMOCA kids. But for weight and for BMI, we see that girls actually do worse with their AMOCA. So if you're an AMOCA girl, you tend to have lower weight and lower BMI if you're from the boyfriend. For sons, there seems to be no difference. And this may be because girls work really hard in this community. They have a lot of economic value within the household, so they may be more exploitable in this area. So alongside these actual returns, we measured some social norms here. So I did a vignette example, and I said, imagine that a man gives, 10 cows to his son, who he believes is his, and 3 cows to the AMOCA son. Is that okay? And then what might happen if somebody did this? And so as you can see here, for all these things, the norm violation is not okay. There's again, this reinforces the idea that there's really strong norms that you have to invest equally in your kids. And then we get the punishments here vary quite a bit. They tend to be verbal and reputational harm type punishments, so they may be reprimanded by senior members of the community. They may suffer reputational harm. In some cases, they may report that the child will be taken away and taken to a family, or that the wife can be taken away. So there could be really strong costs to violation of these norms. So overall, we see a pretty minor bias in relative to paternity certainty. So I was quite surprised when I did this. I would have expected a much stronger result, a much stronger bias, and actually the results are pretty minimal. We just see domain and sex-specific effects where AMOCA boys are more likely to be fostered out, AMOCA girls are more likely to suffer from food transfers. So this really speaks to the power of social fathering in this community. They're really expected to invest equally, and for the most part they tend to. When they can get away with it, sometimes they don't invest equally. So I want to return here a little bit. Why do we see such a low bias in investment? Again, this is very contrary to what the evolutionary literature would suggest. Well, part of it is probably that there's social cost norm violation, right, which I highlighted here. If the community views you, more negatively because you're biasing your investment, and that may come at some cost to you down the road. The children are of economic value in this community. They work really hard, particularly girls tend to work really hard. Boys do a lot of cattle herding, and girls do everything else. So girls in particular are really valuable to him and men and women. So I want to focus on the second part here I want to talk about is the social value of children and how the social value of children may mediate some of these investment patterns and decision-making processes. So here's a quote I really like. Reproductive decision-making in response to opportunities for status enhancement rather than fertility maximization. So we may be seeing reproductive decisions not to increase your reproductive output, not to increase your fitness, but because you're trying to increase your status. So this may be impacting some of these decisions related to investment in care. So we're not biasing our investment patterns on our AMOCA kids because we get benefit from a fitness perspective, but because we get benefit from a social perspective. And so I talked a little bit about this before, but social fatherhood is associated with a number of status benefits. So this is what we're going to predict here. So we might predict that number of marital children and self-reported status is related to social fatherhood. if we are seeing a benefit to being a good father, to being a social father. And then we should see that biological fatherhood would be a weaker predictor of status in this case. So this could be number of total children or fraction of non-AMOCA children in your household. And so to do this work, we pulled a lot of different types of data together. So we have a big relational database that organizes all these different types of data we collect. So this includes things like longitudinal data, reproductive histories. We also did a task on an iPad, so which you can see the woman is completing here. So they are shown pictures of individuals in their community. She says, okay, this guy's influential, yes, and it goes on to the next person. We also did this for desirability for all men and women in the community, so they rated opposite sex individuals. They asked how desirable a partner that person was. So we collected all this data and then modeled it to get probability outcomes for each individual man. So the outcome I'm showing you is the probability that that individual man is rated as influential. And so again, the main question here is, does fatherhood confer status benefits? And so here I'm showing on the first plot on the left, age-corrected number of marital kids predicts the probability of being rated influential. So if you have more kids, you are more likely to be rated as an influential member of the community. This is, again, corrected for age. Of course, wealth is also related to status, right? So higher status men tend to be wealthier, and wealthier men tend to have more kids. So that's a little bit of a confounding variable. If we correct for wealth, we still see a meaningful effect for number of kids on status. And even if we correct for wealth on number of kids, we see this relationship holding steady. So one of my other predictions here was that if social fatherhood is a really important measure of status, it shouldn't matter the proportion of kids that are AMOCA in your household, right? A strong evolution perspective would predict that high status men would have more biological children. And that's actually not what we're seeing. So here I've got percentage of AMOCA. This is the percentage of kids in your household that are from the boyfriend, not from the father. And I've got probability of being rated influential, and I actually see no relationship here. So men who have lots of AMOCA kids, who all their kids are from the boyfriend, are not less influential in the community. They don't have lower status. So basically, biological fatherhood has no impact on status, whereas social fatherhood does have an impact on status. And so I was curious to look at the differences between men and women in their perception of status. And surprisingly, while men and women's ratings of influence are correlated, they're not that strongly correlated, right? So men and women are viewing status differently. And so I looked at the number of marital kids on status as rated by men and as rated by men and as rated by women. We actually see a much stronger effect of number of marital kids on women's perceptions of status. So more marital kids, more social fatherhood is more reflected in women's views of you than in men's views of you. So this really suggests to me that in addition to being a predictor of status, we're actually predicting sort of reproductive outcomes here. So men may be pressured to be good social fathers because they're going to get reproductive benefits in return from other women. And again, this is a community where almost every single married man in the community has got multiple girlfriends. So there are fitness returns to being viewed positively, even if you're married in this community. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip this last one just out of time. So just want to talk about the results a little bit. So we see a surprising low bias in investment related to paternity uncertainty. Again, this is really surprising for strong evolutionary-minded folks. And we also see, I also showed you some evidence to suggest that part of the reason this might be that men derive status benefits from being fathers, from being social fathers. So biological paternity is unrelated to status. Social fatherhood may be associated with, and there's a suite of desirable characteristics. And we also found that social fatherhood is more strongly predictive of women's assessments of status, suggesting that they may be doing this to get reproductive benefits down the line. That's something we're looking into later. But going back to sort of the main point of the talk, when we're looking at the sort of reproductive decisions men are making related to paternity and maternal care, we need to think more strongly about how these different domains are viewed in the community. So evolutionary anthropologists need to be thinking about community-wide views, not sort of evolutionary-wide views here. So we see that, men derive a number of benefits from fatherhood unrelated to biological paternity. By looking for these benefits, we're going to better be able to understand how these reproductive decisions are being made. So I just want to thank project co-directors and all these folks and funding. And that is it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. We have time for a few questions.
Sure, so you talked about, obviously, you're interested in fatherhood and the effect of fathers. What's the sort of social consequence for women of having kids from their husband or more boyfriends, and the percentage of kids they have with different fathers? Is there any consequence to women one way or the other, socially or?
So there are strong social norms that protect women in this situation. So men are not allowed to sort of retaliate. Jealousy is viewed very negatively in this community, so jealous husbands are viewed very negatively. So there's lots of social norms, institutions that kind of protect women. Women who don't have boyfriends are kind of viewed negatively. They're seen as undesirable, and even men who report that, oh, I don't want a wife that doesn't have a boyfriend, is who wants that wife? So that sort of thing. So again, it's
So there's social benefits to women of having more
Yes.
boyfriends also?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the talk, it was very interesting. My question is about the difference between the social and the biological children in terms of care of aging parents. What does that look like in this community?
So for men, they typically are heads of household until they die. And then the household members include their co-wives and their kids and unrelated family members. It tends to be women who are caring for older men, not surprisingly. Younger men, when they say their 20s and early 30s, they're often off at various cattle posts and not around. So there's not really any way for them to care for their fathers other than care for the cattle.
Is it the biological daughter then that cares for the?
It's the daughter.
The
daughters.
Daughters, whomever that might be.
Yes.
Okay, collectively, interesting.
Here. So you may have said this already, but what is it the woman who gives birth that determines where that child is going to be socially taken care of? I mean, if they have different fathers,
Mhm.
but you're talking about the fathers taking care of not just their own children, but other fathers. It sounds like it's the woman's, who she gives birth to determines which man is taking
So
care of that.
it doesn't matter who the biological father is, it's the marital father that matters. So if she's married, all the kids that come from her belong to that man.
Right.
And even if she's, there's child marriage in this community, so they get, a lot of girls get married around 8 years old, they don't actually go live with that man until they're of age. But if they had kids before they move in with the new husband, then those kids belong to that husband, even if they never lived together or never had sex.
Oh,
One more question. Thanks for the talk. I have two questions. The first one is about representation. So from what you told us, this is a community of about 2,000 people. How much of this is transferable to other African communities? And the second question is about the point that you made about inheritance being
Matrilateral.
matrilateral, right? So when it comes to inheritance, these communities are matrilineal. But when it comes to bride price, they are patrilineal,
Right.
except the father.
Right.
The father told that. How much of that expectation, that shift between patrilineality and matrilineality affects what the father can do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first point, how this transfers to other populations, this is a relatively understudied phenomenon because it's so touchy. And I think that non-paternity rates are higher than we expect. Almost all the non-paternity research is done in Western Europe, and it shows like 1% to 2%. But there's lots and lots of other populations around the world where it's probably much higher. The Capella is probably higher. There's a handful of other groups like on top of my head that have sort of normative informal relationships. So it's probably much higher than we know. Himas are probably on the far end of the spectrum. I think the idea about working with Himba is that, not that the opportunity is so high, it's that they can talk about it. So I can meet a new Himba woman and interview her, and she can tell me these things, and that's okay. I think that's the distinctive trait from the other groups. In terms of how norms are shifting inheritance, that's something we did start studying with a paper on that last year. So we are seeing that particularly kids that go to school and younger individuals that are exposed to education, their norms are starting to shift a little bit. So kids that go to school and younger individuals, they tend to want to inherit from the father, not from the uncle. I suspect as they become increasingly market integrated, they're going to start to adopt those outgroup norms, and we're going to see that shift occurring more and more rapidly.
Okay, thank you very much. So,
One more question from George.
If you look at the consequences of the woman having a boyfriend from outside the tribe,
To my knowledge, that I don't. No, I guess that has happened. I don't think there's consequences. I think it's not very common. I can think of a couple examples where women have reported. They live within an area that's got a number of tribes that are sort of generally related. You know, they speak the same language. They're often hard to tell apart. So I don't think there's social consequences to that. I think it's just infrequent.
okay, can we? Thank you very much for the.